almost vampiric energy, this gothic energy. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I would like to welcome you to another fragrance review / presentation. Today I'm very excited to talk about this fragrance. I knew that once I started cranking out my fragrance reviews on this channel, that this was going to be one of the first ones I talked about because I really know it. Today we are talking about the legendary Dominique Ropion / Frederic Malle collaboration, Portrait of a Lady, one of the defining niche fragrances, defining rose fragrances. We'll get that out of the way early. This is a rose fragrance indeed. Defining just overall masterpiece in the niche perfumery, fine French perfumery world. At this point, I really know this fragrance. I came into contact with it around 2 years ago. So don't let the juice level fool you. I just got this bottle, but I have so much experience with this fragrance that if all of my wares were to be taken into account in one bottle, the bottle will be down to here at the very least, or empty. 100 ml bottle like this. So I know this fragrance like the back of my hand. I've worn it a lot. I have a lot of experience with it. Compliments. I've lived in this fragrance. I've struggled with it, and we're going to talk about all of that. First and foremost, the House of Frederic Malle. If you guys know, if you've watched the few, I don't think I've only released like 4 fragrance videos at this point, but in each and every one of them, almost, I've mentioned probably Frederic Malle in every single one. I have a lot of respect for the man. I have a lot of respect for the brand. He's departed at this point. As again, this is 2025. He departed in June of 24. But 14 years ago, but in 2010, this fragrance really kind of changed the trajectory of the brand. From what I estimate and from what I've kind of gathered from doing research, again, I didn't get into fine French perfumery until really 2022. But from what I've gathered, this was a game changer, and it's still evident now. One of the house's best sellers, one of the notorious fragrances. If you mention Portrait of a Lady, people already know you're talking about this fragrance. They know you're talking about Frederic Malle. It's one of those fragrances that is really unique. The blend, the way it wears, the Baroque elegance about it, the intricacy of the spices coming in, everything. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Again, this is such a interesting composition, but I have a probably interesting, controversial take on it as well. Right off the bat, again, like I mentioned earlier, this is a rose fragrance. In particular, this is a Turkish rose fragrance. Dominique Ropion and Frederic Malle have talked about it and made it known that it takes at least 400 roses to make one bottle of Portrait of a Lady. Along with the rose, you have some red berry, raspberry accord. I see red berry a lot in the description, so that could be like cranberry, which I kind of think of it more like a cranberry, more than a raspberry. I've got experience with Frederic Malle raspberry accords, and 2 of the other rose fragrances I have. Lipstick Rose, which is a fantastic rose. We will get to that one day. And Frederic Malle's The Moon, of course, which you've heard me talk about before. If not, you will hear me make a video about this very soon. This is one of the creme de la creme grails in my collection and in the fragrance game in general. Now, again, like I said, I feel like this is more of a cranberry, more than a raspberry. It doesn't feel as sweet as those 2. It doesn't even have the jamminess and the sweetness that comes with this honeyed rose tonnerre. Or un rose. You also get a lot of spices. You get cinnamon and clove in particular. That dynamic duo really works well here. It's almost got that same spicy kick. Cinnamon doesn't really come out in a gourmand way like it would in Hermès Ambre Narguilé or Mousse Ravageur, which I have, but it comes out more like it does in almost like a Chanel Coco EDP type of way. It doesn't really have any gourmand leaning or tendency to it, which might be the reason why I struggled again with it initially, and a little bit through certain stages today. Along with this, we get a big dose of patchouli, and then of course you're getting musk, white musk at the bottom, and you can tell it's got that clean, kind of crisp French finish. And then you have what I consider like the glue note of perfumery. A lot of compositions have benzoin, and benzoin kind of really ties together. It almost fills in the gaps of any sort of composition, and I feel that way about benzoin in almost every composition that's in. It just smooths a fragrance out. It sweetens it up just slightly, but it doesn't really give it a gourmand lean. It just sweetens it just enough to keep it from being tart or sour. I think that's specifically the case here. I think it really just works to smooth out the composition and just make it overall a more indistinguishable blend. But when you blend it all together, and then black currant, fruit accord. But when you blend those notes together, you get this. And now, Portrait of a Lady, when I first smelled it, I remember I heard a lot about it, and I was getting into the house of Frederic Malle. I started with, Bonham and I, MFK, Grand Soir, Bonham and I, New Harlem. Then I came into Guerlain's La Métier via Spirituous Double Vanille and some of this stuff like that. And then I heard about Portrait of a Lady, because Portrait of a Lady, make no mistake, is one of those. This fragrance is held in such high regard. I mean, I'm talking about guys that are on this platform, which is YouTube, that have thousands of bottles, from Bowtie Fragrance Guy to Sebastian, aka the Perfume Guy, to Persolays, to even Kevin Samuels. Guys that have literally thousands of bottles, guys that had smelled thousands of fragrances, tens of thousands of fragrances for sure. Guys who've been in the fragrance game almost since I was born. Like these guys all put this fragrance as one of their all-time favorites. Like when you talk to them about definitely best Frederic Malle, it's like hands down. You ask them, and guys, again, these are guys who have the moon, who have the night, which I love, who have dawn, which I love, etc. Guys that have these fragrances rank this consistently as one of the best, one of their top favorite 4, one of their best 5 of all time, maybe their favorite fragrance of all time. And so this speaks a lot of volumes. New reviewers, I think this guy named Seldomly Often, he's a great young reviewer that's new to the platform, relatively speaking. And he's got this, I think, number 2 on his all-time favorites. And he's got a lot of fragrances and has a lot of experience with fragrance. So that really speaks volumes about this fragrance. Now, me personally, I really like this fragrance. I have about 50 bottles in my fragrance collection. All in all, is this a top 10 fragrance? I would say so. In my collection, I would say so. But it's not for the reasons that a typical fragrance would get those type of nods. Let me explain. When I first sprayed this fragrance, which I'm going to do right now on camera. First spray this fragrance. I'm going to be honest, I struggle. Still to this day. I struggle a lot less than I have 2 years ago. You kind of, knock on the door enough, you're going to eventually get in type of thing. But my persistence with trying to understand this fragrance, my persistence with wearing this fragrance, even days when I didn't want to, just so I could really understand this fragrance, really understand the overall composition and beauty. Hell, to be honest, this fragrance really inspired a song that I made, which is called Portrait of a Gaga, which I actually have playing in the background of this video. Portrait of a Gaga. Now this fragrance right here really helped inspire that. There's a lot of imagery I want to talk about with this fragrance as well. When I spray it, I struggle because it's a huge dose of rose, and I'm going to be honest, out of all the notes, rose is one of my least favorite, I would say. Probably my least favorite floral, to be honest, especially if you're talking about the main floral. I much prefer tuberose. I much prefer iris, even though it's, the orris root. It's not really a floral, but still, I much prefer jasmine. I much prefer Orange Blossom, you know, slash Neroli. But this, the rose, it's indistinguishably rose. It's big, it's bold. But to be honest with you, I really prefer the rose opening and Rose Tenere a bit more. It's got a jammier, honeyed, sweeter kind of vibe. This is more like dry, tart, and very old world. When I smell this is a very Victorian perfume. Now, I've watched a lot of reviews on Portrait of a Lady, but you don't hear that word explicitly described. People kind of dance around it, but really, this is a Victorian era perfume. It really, really is. This is a black velvet. This is a black velvet gown. This is umbrellas. This is ruffles. This is, you know, it's very much an old world perfume, but it's very nice. It almost, I've heard people compare it to, it almost smells like a literal Portrait of a Lady. Like if you were to smell a canvas of an oil painting of like the Mona Lisa when it was first constructed. Yeah, I kind of get that. It's got this very dry, almost musky, kind of indistinguishable start. To be honest with you, the blend is so well done that some people I've heard people miss the rose, believe it or not. They're like, well, I don't get much rose. And these are experienced people, like they're not newbies or, you know, and they say they miss the rose, which is funny because it's there, it's huge, it's right there. You know, Dominic Ropion likes to saturate fragrances with whatever the ideal note is. See cornflower for a reference. And so, trust me, the rose is there. But I struggle with it. Like, you know, there's an Ambroxan kind of thing in there from what I've heard and what I've gathered. And you can smell it. If you're familiar with Ambroxan, you can tell when it's there and in big doses. And it can be a little headache inducing. I'm going to be honest. Of all the fragrances in my collection, Portrait of a Lady is one of the ones where if you're not ready for it, it can be headache inducing. Same way Iris Poudre, they can be headache inducing, both of them. I'm not going to lie. Rose Tenere a little bit as well. The rose is just coming out in such a big dose. Rose is one of those fragrances where it can be headache inducing. And that's just not, you know, that's just an objective thing. It can be headache inducing. Portrait of a Lady, Portrait of a Lady is another fragrance like this. However, where the magic comes in, because honestly, based off of opening, I still have the same reaction I had almost years ago, where it's like, like that's interesting. It's interesting. Like you really don't know another fragrance that smells like this, and especially that starts like this. Even other rose patchouli fragrances like Rose Amira, the new Rose Amira by Guerlain, which I'm going to eventually get, I like, from the Absolute Allegoria line. That fragrance, I love the opening of this a lot more than Portrait. I'm going to be honest, it's a little bit sweeter, it's a little bit more, it's less headache inducing. I like it a little bit more than Portrait of a Lady. Portrait of a Lady has this kind of staunch, kind of austere kind of vibe starting from the beginning and it runs all the way through. Now, this right here, I wrote Dry Down in the corner. This right here is a card that I sprayed probably 10 hours ago while I was at work. Wore this fragrance today with this sweater, and I knew I was going to review it today. I was like, today is going to be the day. So I sprayed this on this card because I wanted to talk about the best part, which is the last part, which is Dry Down. The Dry Down is divine. This is one of the probably top 5 dry downs in fragrance that I've ever experienced. The opening there's a lot of other openings I appreciate in fragrance more than that. A lot. Even comparing it to the Moon, which is like the brother to this, to the lady of this, the portrait of a man, which is the Night, which I love a lot more. It's got this huge dose of oud that covers up the blue cheesy oud start, covers up any of this headache-inducing kind of staunch, almost sour rose start that you get here. Covers it up. And so you kind of get, but the thing is though, the nights kind of sacrifices the end of this. The dry down of the night to me is a little bit less impressive than this. I'm not going to lie. And even though I love the night, it's a $2,000 perfume. Eventually I will buy it. But honestly, the $500 Portrait of a Lady dry down beats it. It's a little bit more intriguing. I've tested them side by side numerous times. It's a little bit more intriguing. I love the dry down. I'm gonna be honest, I like the dry down of Portrait of a Lady more than the Moon. More than Frederic Malle's The Moon, which again, you want to talk about openings? This opening is like one of the top 5 openings in perfume history. So this dry down is magic. This dry down is heavenly. This dry down is everything. It defines the fragrance. And fortunately, the dry down, you'd rather the dry down be better than the opening because that's what you're going to get throughout the life. But it takes about an hour, at least an hour, for me to start really enjoying this fragrance. I'm not going to lie. At least 1 hour. Once you hit an hour and a half, 2 hours, now we're really starting to cook with grease. Because this is really, really, really where the spices really come out. The frankincense also comes in, and that's what also helps it. I love frankincense in perfumery. I love it in SDV, Spirituous Double Vanille, which is one of my top 5 favorite fragrances of all time. Probably top 3, to be honest. It's not top 1. I love it in Louis Vuitton Ambre Nomade. I love it in numerous other compositions. Frankincense is a friend of mine, you know, in the fragrance world. It's excellent. All in all, this fragrance really becomes a Victorian, one of one, your favorite fragrance reviewer's favorite fragrance type of creation. It's really, 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 really something to behold. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that I have it in my collection. Again, I had a lot of ups and downs with this fragrance. I've sold bottles of this. But every bottle I sold, the juice level was like down to here. And so, like I said, I've had a lot of experience with this fragrance. I won a lot of samples, a lot of stuff. I know this fragrance, and I enjoy it. I like it. But it's the opening that kind of is staunch. The only other opening that I find less appealing, let me say, than this opening, you know, from a fragrance that I actually like and I have a lot of respect for, is Guerlain's Cure Beluga by Olivier Polge. To me, that fragrance has like this Robitussin kind of cough syrup medicine opening I can't, and you have to, that's the only fragrance that really kind of has a less appealing opening to me probably than Portrait of a Lady. But the dry down, I'm telling you, I'm hard pressed to name 5 fragrances that have a better dry down than this. I'm hard pressed. So that's just me, that's my personal opinion. Again, I'm a guy who likes white florals. I love tuberose a lot more. Overall, this fragrance wears heavy. It wears big. You know it's there on you and other people know you're wearing it. The way it wears is really incomparable. This is going to get you attention. It really, like, I've worn a lot of perfumes to work and to different places, but this one consistently gets compliments. Consistently, people are asking, what are you wearing? Like, the power of this fragrance, the sillage of this fragrance is unmatched. It hangs in the air. I was telling my roommate the other day, the way Portrait of a Lady sits and hangs in the air, very few other fragrances can do that. Ambre Nomade's one of them, Chanel Le Lyon's one of them. But it's very few fragrances, and both of those are fragrances that are heavy, man. You know, and they're almost can be oppressive. I would say this is the least oppressive of the big performers like Promise and again some of these other big perfumes. Probably the least oppressive, but this can, again, like I said, if you spray too much, you're going to get a headache and it's going to be oppressive to you. But everybody else is going to be enjoying it, but you are going to be suffering. So, at least from the start. So you have to be ready for this fragrance. I think when you wear it, to me, I've always reserved that This is not an everyday wear. A lot of people I've heard talk about, oh, this fragrance is my signature, this is an everyday wear. I can see it being a signature because of how balanced the composition is. It's a little sweet, it's a little spicy, it's definitely spicy, but it's floral. It can fit in the winter time. It's got the heft to stand up to the cold. It's got the rose floral aspect that's not too oppressive and too cloying in the heat. But however, I think that it's an elegant Baroque perfume. I don't believe that this is meant to be worn every day. Frederic Malle and Dominique Ropion have said, yeah, it can be worn every day, which is funny. I mean, they're trying to sell bottles. Let's be honest, like, they're trying to sell more bottles, but in my opinion, this is not an everyday fragrance. The name indicates that it's not. If you're a guy, you're not comfortable saying Portrait of a Lady, which I am, and I have told people what it's called, and they kind of look at you weird, but because it's America. But Portrait of a Lad. Say Portrait of a Lad. And if they type it in, they'll find it, But Portrait of a Lad, if you really feel a way about saying Portrait of a Lady as a man while wearing this, but don't. But Portrait of a Lady, I think, is done just right to where you spend your $500 and you still feel like this fragrance is worth it, not only from a scent composition profile standpoint, but from a performance standpoint. Again, this fragrance is very seductive. It's got that dark kind of almost vampiric energy, this gothic energy. People talk about Rose Tenaire being a gothic rose. Yes, but not to the degree of Portrait of a Lady. Portrait of a Lady and the Moon kind of give you a lot more of that, almost like Dita Von Teese kind of vibes. I every time I smell this, I'm going to be honest, I get brunette, dark red lip or bold red lip, in a black velvet dress. It just kind of works that way, like, for me personally. And again, not to indicate that nobody else can wear it. Clearly, I don't fit that description, but I'm wearing it. But that's just what I get from it personally. It's dark, it's gothic. It's very much an after hours perfume, in my opinion, which is why, like, wearing this in the middle of the summer, during the middle of the day, it's not really the vibes to me like that. Can it be done? Absolutely. By all means, wear your fragrances whenever you want. I'm somebody who, despite living in a very warm climate, I'll wear, Grand Soir or Tobacco Vanille whenever I feel like it. So do whatever you want to do. Wear your fragrances how you want to wear them. But in my opinion, this fragrance, like, one bottle of Portrait of a Lady should last you a while, because you probably shouldn't be wearing it that much. But it's really, really, really a special perfume. It's a type of perfume that Cruella de Vil, if I'm saying her name right, it's the kind of perfume that Angelina Jolie in Maleficent should be wearing. It's just one of those type of frags. These are the kind of characters I think of when I smell this. If from a man's perspective, this is definitely a black suit with a red tie. If there's ever a black suit with a power red tie fragrance for a man, it's this one. I can't think if I'm ever wearing a black suit with a red tie, that you better believe Portrait of a Lady is on my skin. It's just made for that. Black and red are the colors. Red, burgundy, maroon. That's the colors. If you're going all black, if you're going red velvet, oh, that'd be gorgeous. This is like a red velvet kind of perfume. It's really gorgeous. Anna Williams vibes. It's just got that kind of, it's got that charisma to it that you really have to put your nose to it and you have to get experience with it. Again, the seductiveness of the spices is what gives it that. But at the same time, like I said, it's got the austerity that keeps away those that need to be kept away. And that's what I like about this perfume. I've never smelled this on a lady. I smell it on guys, which is funny. A lot of guys enjoy this, but if I ever smell this on a lady, it would tell me a lot about her. And I like what it's telling. From a lady's standpoint, it kind of has MANEATER vibes, you know? It's got femme fatale all over it. Femme fatale all over it. That's exactly what this is. It's femme fatale through and through. You know, I've heard people describe this as charisma in a bottle, and I agree. It's such a conversation starter because there's really nothing like this. And again, going back to when I first put my nose on this 2 years ago, in Neiman Marcus, I remember like thinking to myself, wow, like, you know, it wasn't what I was hoping it would be, I guess, because you can't be ready for something like this, really, unless you've gone like, because I feel like you can't be ready for this because there's no way you've smelled a ton of fragrances, like high level fragrances, but you haven't smelled this one. You see, it's like one of those frags to where you're gonna meet this fragrance before you're ready for it. Most likely, you're gonna meet it before you're ready for it, and so you're not going to really understand it. Other rose fragrances like Oud Satin Mood, Extrait, the Parfum, or the regular one are gonna be much more appealing, generally speaking, because again, they're sweeter. Stuff like that, Raja, Dove's Amber Oud was more appealing to me. You know, like, it's stuff like that is gonna be more appealing than this. It just is. The Moon for sure is gonna be more appealing, most likely, unless you really kind of just can't stand the blue cheese aspect, blue cheese kind of oud undertones of that. But yeah, this is like one of those fragrances that you really have to put your nose on it. I'm actually going to compare this to a fragrance that is not a floral. I'm going to compare this to Tom Ford's Black Orchid. If you know this is a truffle, patchouli, ylang-ylang kind of jasmine perfume. It's a lot sweeter than Portrait of a Lady, but it's got this indescribable, again, je ne sais quoi kind of seductiveness to it. Again, vampiric. Any of the things that I said about Portrait of a Lady in terms of the qualitative aspects of that, you get the same thing here. You know, it's that's the kind of vibe that if you've smelled this, I'll put it like this: if you've smelled Tom Ford Black Orchid and you like the vibes that it gives, that's kind of what Portrait of a Lady gives, just in a different way. Again, spicy rose, you know. Earthy patchouli. That helps with what I'm trying to convey with Portrait of a Lady. Black Orchid. It's got this very much. I know Tom Ford, when he probably first put his nose on this in 2010, I know he was mad that he didn't release that first. Because if there was another house to make Portrait of a Lady, it definitely would be Tom Ford. It would fit side by side with things like this, Tobacco Vanille, Vanille Fatale, Oud Wood. You know, it would sit like with all Noir de Noir is kind of his own. I guess some people would say it's, heck, they beat him to the punch with 2007's Noir de Noir, but that's completely different. It's a lot sweeter. It doesn't have the spice at all that Portrait of a Lady has. It's not as austere. It's a lot more inviting than that. So, in my opinion, Portrait of a Lady is such a unique composition. I don't even think Tom Ford has anything in its wheelhouse that is like that. Black Velvet, Red Velvet. This would actually be a nice his and her date night or event night perfume combination. You know, his, her, his, her. It could work either way. So, and above all else, if there's one Frederic Malle you need to have in your collection, I'd recommend that you get this one. I think that it says Frederic Malle. I think Frederic Malle does florals better than pretty much anything else. That's really what he's good at. He and the perfumers that he's collaborated with, florals define Frederic Malle's house. And again, I'm going to make a Frederic Malle specific video, a house kind of overview one day. But florals define Frederic Malle. And this one is the floral to have. If not this one though, me personally, Carnal Flower is right there neck and neck with this one. But if you don't like white florals at all, and you don't like green fragrances, go with this one. Even if you're not a big rose fan, you'll probably learn to like this one. Give it time, wear it. I'm telling you though, as soon as you wear it, you might hate it your first wear, but everyone else is going to be like, yo, what is this? So that concludes my overall review. Let me know what you think about this fragrance. What do you think about this masterpiece's creation? Again, it's pretty much defined the house of Frederic Malle. It is probably the #1 hit. I'm not even gonna say probably. It's the #1 commercially and critically acclaimed fragrance of the house. But hey, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you next time. But until next time, you have a great